everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone, so you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. My final guest for this season, although I'm planning to do a kind of an additional episode after this. It'll be a bonus for people who are patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to see it, I'm going to talk about my plans for the podcast because this is the end of my 8th season. So it's just amazing to me that it's gone on this far. And if I make it to 10 seasons, well, something has to be done to celebrate that. Having said that, I would like to introduce our guest today. After studying journalism, he worked as a registered nurse for many years before turning to fiction writing. He is the author of the Peter Clancy novels, as well as a thriller called Fury's War, which he co-wrote with his wife, Kay Bell. My guest today, it's my pleasure to introduce Thomas Bell, who writes under the name T.W. Lawless. Hi, Tom.
Correct.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Excellent.
I've had a coffee, I'm fine.
Oh, yes. You're always fine once you have that coffee.
Yeah.
Amen to that. So how are things in Australia?
Well, fine at the moment. I think the weather's okay today. Well, we live near the sea, which is always okay. We love the sea. But yeah, it's a weekend. But what's today? I'm getting confused with time difference. It's Saturday today.
Oh my gosh, wow, it's Friday where I am and it's Saturday where
I
you
know,
are.
like, I always feel like Australia, oh, we live in the future.
That's right, yeah. Everything's going to be fine because
Yeah,
they're still
everything's
alive
fine.
in Australia.
Yeah, you just got to get to Saturday.
Just take it one day at a time.
I know.
One time zone at a time.
Yeah.
Let's see. I wanted to ask you about Fury's War first, because for me, it was a really interesting read because you were writing about World War II, but you were writing about it from an Australian perspective. And that's something that I've just never read.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write that book?
Well, I guess my father, because North Queensland, the family came from North Queensland, from a small country town, which was, a bit like the one in the book. And, sleepy, the gold rush had gone, and basically the town was a ghost town. It becoming a ghost town until the Americans came in the 1942 or whatever, wanting an Air Force base. So that's what happened. An Air Force base arrived, and an Australian Air Force base arrived, and there was this big influx of military people, plus a big cultural impact. So this country town became vibrant with all these American troops, like thousands. And of course, people loved it. Some people didn't like it. It changed the town, but all over Australia that happened, and they wanted to be in Northern Australia because there was the access to Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Islands. And some of those stories in there are true. But sometimes the Australian troops didn't like the American troops because they were better paid, and Australian girls got, liking the American troops, and Australians didn't like that. And of course, boys being boys, some fights and whatnot. So, and I just put that layer of the police officer, trying to navigate his way through that and keep law and order, and sometimes trying to work with the Americans because he'd been in the military with the Americans, and trying to keep his town stable through all this. So I thought it was a different spin on things, because I don't think peacetime wars, not peacetime, but the home front, don't often hear about the home front in, especially Australia. I think maybe it was the first, I don't know.
Well, it's the first I've read it.
Yeah, it was a great to write and to work with my wife and whatnot. Yeah, so we got through that okay, unscathed, and we're creative differences, but we got through it, and it came out to be a great book.
Good. How did you handle your creative differences?
Just usually, to argue, and then my wife always wins, and I let her win, and no, we just work it out eventually. We just have discussions and whatnot, and so that you just look at the end process, and it all seems to work in the end. I think I've never co-authored a book with anyone. I don't know if that happens very often, but it was something different to do.
I think it's happening more frequently than it was in the past, especially with self-publishing.
Yeah, like I've seen authors like James Patterson. Didn't he do a book with Bill Clinton? And I think he's done one with Dolly Parton, I think. But that's James Patterson anyway. But yeah, maybe it is becoming more common. I think because two heads are better than one, as they say.
I've had really good luck collaborating on screenplays with people.
Oh, that's right. You do screenplays,
yeah. Yeah. It's really a wonderful process, I think. Do you find that it helps you as a writer to collaborate with somebody else?
Oh, I couldn't do it in isolation. Like, even if haven't written a book together, because Kay's a writer also, we can talk over ideas, flesh out things, and like try this sort of stuff. I think it really works. I don't think maybe being a writer by yourself is a little bit isolating. You need to work with other people. I think sometimes try out your ideas on people and see if they work and not work.
I think that's absolutely true. Let's see, you've also published several Peter Clancy novels. Tell us about Peter Clancy and what went into creating that character.
Peter Clancy, yeah. Well, once again, I thought, an Australian character, because you see these thriller books being dominated by British characters, American characters, and now Scandinavian characters I see in other people. But I thought maybe something different. Well, I'm Australian, I sort of understand the place a little bit. And, I wanted to go away from the detectives, private eyes, try maybe a journalist, because, an investigative journalist, and try pay homage to, how a journalist would acquire a story. So that's what I just thought about it, and started, 2012 or whatever, wrote the first book, and I've been sort of going since, trying out different scenarios, and now I'm up to book 6. You sort of started out the idea came from when I was young. There used to be a publication called the Melbourne Truth, which is now defunct, and my mother used to get it because it had the race guide in it, but it was renowned as being a bit racy. It had a page 3 girl, and those scandal stories. And I thought, wonder what it's like working for a paper like that. So that's part of the idea where Peter Clancy was born, and that was in the first 2 books. But they made up stories sometimes, and and they'd do anything to get a story. And so that's where Peter Clancy was born and based for a little while.
Cool. Let's see. Now, your latest release, Beach Days, deals with some pretty serious issues, very relevant issues. Can you talk about those?
Well, once again, dealing with the environment, and I've always had a thing about the environment, how people treat it, and talking about also having bad neighbours. And I think we were living down just outside Melbourne at a peninsula, and there was stories going around of illegal dumping, and because people didn't want to get paid the going to the dump to dump rubbish. You have to pay in Australia, and then you've got to sort out the rubbish into different classifications. And so some people were just dumping it. And then apparently I'd heard people will dump rubbish, like building site rubbish, because some building property developers aren't the nicest people in the world. And they don't want to have to pay all that money to dump the rubbish. So they'll just pay someone and they'll just dump it anywhere, farmland or by the side of the highway. So there's this big industry, and it just made me angry about why they're doing this. And I also read stories about the underworld being involved in illegal dumping because it's a way of laundering money. So I thought, well, yeah, Peter Clancy, could put him in there, and he has a heart attack, and I thought, he just wants some peace and quiet, and of course he never does peace and quiet. So that's what happened. I just took it from there and involved corruption and other elements to make it exciting.
Excellent.
But yeah, I think there is a problem across the world. I've even heard stories about the mafia are involved in legal dumping of rubbish. Of course, it's toxic waste, and then you hear stories about they dump asbestos. I heard stories in Australia they're dumping asbestos anywhere they want to.
My goodness. Serious situation, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is.
What are your plans for the series? Do you envision a certain number of books that you're going to write, or do you just plan to keep writing them until you get tired of it?
I'm in a sort of state of flux at the moment. I've sort of gotten halfway through a current book, but I'd like to go on a holiday first, because we haven't had our holiday to Greece yet. And that got, of course, cancelled during COVID. So maybe after that I'll write another book. So I don't know if it's writer's block, but I think it's sort of like wanting to go on a holiday overseas sort of situation at the moment. Because
I wouldn't mind taking one myself.
I know. I think everyone wants to go on a holiday, and the airlines took hold of that because some of the airfares are just have been very exorbitant. I think they're coming down now, but I know COVID affected a lot of lives. I think we cancelled 3 times.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, because we've been really careful about not going places, and it's just like, when can we actually go somewhere?
I know. Is it still? There's no lockdowns now in America, is there?
Not lockdowns, no. Right now, it depends on what state you're in. It depends on what political persuasion you are.
Yeah.
It depends on what you believe. It's so confusing.
Before we couldn't go to different states without having permits and whatnot. It was it was like being in a war or something situation. You were sort of locked down. You can't do this. We were a bit luckier here in New South Wales. It was a bit more relaxed, but in Victoria and Melbourne, that had the strictest lockdown laws in the world. And of course, we've got a second house there, so to get there was quite hard at times. And you had to be checked at the airport with your permit, and if you didn't have your permit, you get sent back. And it's really was a really strange time.
Yeah, it's been, absolutely. What authors have most inspired you to write?
Authors?
What authors are your favorites, most inspire you?
There's different types. I've always loved history than anything else, but I guess thriller authors I liked, trying to think off the top of my head, LA Confidential author.
James Elroy?
James Elroy, yeah, I read some of his books years ago, and I like the dryness and the punchiness of it, and it's sort of the way he spoke and the narrative. I thought, I like that.
It's very
I always like,
terse.
who's that?
Terse is what comes to
Terse,
mind.
yeah, I like terse. And it seemed like realistic.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
also liked, I know Frederick Forsyth, he did Day of the Jackal. I always liked him as an author.
Mm. You know, that's something I've always meant to read, Day of the Jackal, and see the movie.
Really well crafted book for action, intention.
And how much research do you usually do when you're working on a novel?
Yeah, I think even when you write a fiction book, you still have to do some research because you might be dealing with some legal situations. And I think in one of the books I didn't know anything about cocaine. They used cocaine. I thought, I've never dealt with cocaine. Not even as a nurse, I dealt with other types of drugs, but I asked someone who'd had some knowledge of it and experience with it about cocaine. So yeah, you have to do those things sometimes. And sometimes police procedures, legal procedure. In the beach days was dealing with how counts, the layers of government and whatnot, that sort of stuff, and about illegal bin dumping. So yeah, sometimes looking up forensics, asking people about forensics, like I've dealt being a nurse, but you're not in doing pathology or whatnot. So you have to do it sometimes, ask people.
To make it more realistic, right. Because obviously, you don't work in those areas. Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who would like to make a career in writing?
Make a career, be prepared for the pitfalls and the ups and the downs, and be persistent and tenacious. Just keep writing through it all, even when it's not going so well. Get involved with other writers and talk to each other. You can become isolated at times, so you need to download and flesh out sometimes ideas with other people. And the industry, I found one of the hardest parts trying to find out the industry, how it works, the printing, and especially when all the social media turned up, how social media works. Because when I started, it was all newspapers and radios. Like I did newspaper interviews and radio interviews. And that's sort of passé now. So it's like podcasts and, your social media account, who's following me on Instagram. That's all how I had to navigate that, trying to work out how's that work, because it going to work for me. So, yeah.
Well, I hear that. It's like so much has changed over the last 10 or 20 years that it is astonishing.
I know. So when I first started, I didn't know what a blog was. Now I'm finding out what a podcast is. And podcasts seem to be the thing. And latest thing I read about in book trend is Audible books. So you have to have a look at that one too.
Yeah. It's just, it's amazing what's going on in media in general.
I know. Legacy media, they call the term I heard the other day, the newspapers.
Yeah. Legacy publishing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have always been fascinated with Australia because it's so far from where I am, and because you guys are in a whole different hemisphere.
I know. But it's your cousins from down under.
Well, I just think it's really awesome. I'll never forget sending a book to a reader in Australia and including a note that said, "I can't believe I am sending a book to a reader who reads me in Australia."
I know. The thing about sending books from Australia to people in America is the cost. So
Yes, yes.
luckily now worked out through Ingram, you can just send it from a factory in America, which costs a whole lot less. I think to send a book from Australia would probably cost me over $20, which is probably more than the cost of the book. Yeah,
It
there
took-
is something about, like, I've always been fascinated why we live so far away from everywhere else, like Europe or America or thereabouts. You know, so we're so far away, and you just got to jump on a plane, go across the Atlantic, and you're in Europe. It's like that's a
I
short trip for
know.
us. Short trip, like
But
uh,
Australia would be a long trip for me.
I know. Well, it's probably 17 or 18 hours. It's like nearly a day. I know that because when you get to Europe or whatever, you're just totally wasted.
Mm.
On a plane.
Well, it'd be worth it just so I could see Australia at least once.
Oh, you haven't been to Australia
I
yet?
have not. I have not seen Australia or New Zealand, two places that
Well,
I'm
you're going to have to
interested in.
come. You're going to have to visit it.
I have to do that. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely, positively.
we live north of Sydney near the beach, which is really beautiful. So you're welcome to stay.
Awesome. Fantastic. I'll have to run this by my husband.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
Buy the book, read the whole series, follow me, all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
Follow Tom, follow TW Lawless.
that's it.
Check out Beach Days, check out Peter Clancy, and definitely check out Fury's War if you want a different take on World War II.
That's right.
Amen.
Uh,
Australia, amen. I couldn't
is
resist.
there any TV shows, Australian TV shows you watch?
TV shows. Oh my gosh. Well, where would I begin? There's a number of things on Netflix I watch. we could
Oh, yeah.
we could go into all that in the bonus episode.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here today, Tom. I appreciate your being on and talking to the listeners about your
Well, thanks for the
books.
invite, Debbie. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will turn it back over to me then, I think, if I can do this right. There
That's
I
it.
go. I knew I could do it.
Did very well.
Very good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Hang on so we can do the bonus episode as well.
Okay.
So for all of you listening, I just wanted to say this is the final episode of season 8. And I cannot believe that it's been 8 years and that we'll be coming up on a 10-year anniversary at some point, assuming I last that long. I'm thinking I will. I'm not that old. It's hard to believe. Anyway, I'm booked all the way into season 11, if you can believe that. So there will be content. And I'm thinking over various options in terms of perks to offer on Patreon, things I could do with the podcast, maybe do a scripted podcast at some point. We'll see. In any case, thank you for listening. In the meantime, take care. And when I see you, till I see you in June, or you hear me in June, one way or the other, happy reading. Talk to you later.